Movember Nuke.
Hello my dear artist and welcome for the 28th episode on Movember Nuke. And today we are talking in two parts about vector blur, vector generator and motion blur. In the first part we will study the velocity. What is a velocity? In a CG, sometimes you receive a different path and I will show you the velocity path. The velocity path is a clue how the motion blur will be applied to an object. You will maybe recognize two colors, the red and the green. You see this sometimes for the UV map or for other kind of channel and to another kind of path. In our case, U and V and red and green will be for the x-axis and the y-axis. Maybe you will notice some yellow color, but the yellow is just a mix between red and green, and you see a lot of black color, and don't be surprised, because if there is black color, that doesn't mean there is no color. Maybe there is only negative value, and that's explained a lot sometimes, especially for the motion blur. So when you have the velocity will be applied, for example, through different node, but the most important node will be the vector blur. The vector blur totally understand how the velocity work. So if I use my vector blur, I will select the V channel for velocity. I will just choose a motion blur of 10 just to be very exaggerated the result. And this is the result. As you see, now there is some motion blur, directional motion blur on the object, and this is only come from the velocity. So sometimes that's pretty heavy to calculate and wonder motion blur from the CG. So the CG team prefer to give us the velocity. The velocity channel will be calculated very fastly because it just gives us number. Not an iteration of a different path, different render in geometry. So, how can you play with velocity with your own technique? I will just use an expression, and this expression will write its own V channel. I will add a vector blur, and my vector blur will be this time with a motion element of 1. That's the normal value on the motion element. I used 10 few seconds ago, but the 1 is a very normal one. So I will use the V channel. And my V channel I will write on the red and the green. In my case, I just want to see what's happening if I directly write value in the V channel, especially on the red one. So I will just write 50. So as you see now, we have a very long horizontal blur. And I guess if I do the same for the green channel, I will have something as a big motion blur for the y-axis. So with this technique, you know how to create your own motion blur. That could be nice to use this technique, for example, on a plate. But that's just unfortunate, because use this on a plate only with the x and y axis and try to just find the y value for the two channels. It's maybe too long and not really intuitive. We have a solution for that. I will use a ramp, not the effect. I just be interested by the ramp for these 2 points on their position. I have a point 0 and a point 1. I can use this information directly my expression. So if I want to take a look on ramp 1 and know where is point 0, so I just put my mouse like this, that will be P0. So if I play with my P0, you will see there is the different value, and that's normal. But I don't want to do this. I want that my P0 and my P1 will be compared to know what will be the intensity of something. So I will use this technique. I will compare by the correct operation, so it will be minus in my case. So now the distance between P0 and P1 will play with the intensity of the blur. That's cool. Now I have to do the same thing, but for the other value of the P0 and for P1. For the moment I have as value P0, but that will be for the X and Y axis will be the same. So I will have to reduce and just limit the looking for operation to the X axis for the first one, and the second one will be on the Y axis. So now that becomes very interesting, because I can play in the distance and I can play with the direction. So like that you're able to create your own value of vector blur. That's going very fast, and if you are curious, maybe you notice sometimes that the result could be negative or positive, but that stays the same because the software considers that the motion blur is on one direction, and the kind of motion blur we have is totally center, so that means there is no difference, for example, on minus 15 and plus 15. So that's all folk. So now you know how to create your own motion blur with a vector blur, and with this ramp to just select the direction of your motion blur. So that's all folk for the first part. The second part will be on the next episode, and we are talking about the vector generator and the difference between the two, vector blur and vector generator, especially for the motion blur. And after we'll go further with the vector generator. You will talk about morphing. So thank you and see you at the next episode. And don't forget, this is for the Movember, so don't hesitate to go on my Movember page and give a donation. Bye bye!